list. Right here, it should show up as your name, DL underscore DL204. If it doesn't show up, then you can pull it off the catalog or ping Shane in Discord. He likes pings. Okay, so go ahead and turn power on your VApp, h5.devsec.club if you haven't got to the IA labs yet. You don't have to follow along, but will probably help. Yeah, stuff will make a little bit more sense.
Can you be more energetic? I'm just falling asleep.
So, what's OpenSSH? First of all, what's SSH? SSH is a secure shell that operates over TCP port 22 normally, but you can change that to whatever you want. There are two parts of it. There's the client and the server. So OpenSSH is one piece of software that offers SSH. There are a few others, but OpenSSH is like the one. So there's OpenSSH client and OpenSSH server. And let's pull up here. So right here's server VApp is the one, is the SSH server, and there we go, web console. Passwords, password one bang. So if you don't have if you don't have OpenSSH server already installed, you can install it with apt and install OpenSSH server like that. I already installed it, so yeah, we don't have to wait through that. OpenSSH is from the OpenBSD project. OpenBSD is an open source Unix-based OS that's focused on a bunch of things, security being one of them. So yeah, pretty cool. What can SSH do? So SSH is generally used for remote shell. So that's executing commands remotely. You can log into stuff and run commands without having to be physically there on the computer running the commands. Kind of useful, like if you wanted to administer your Minecraft server remotely. You can also copy files over it. So SCP and SFTP are both methods of copying files. SFTP is FTP over SSH, which you generally use a client for, and SCP, you can just like SCP file. I'll show that a little bit more in depth later. And you can also do tunneling, which tunneling is pretty cool. It basically creates an encrypted tunnel between your computer and the other computer and allows you to do stuff. So you could set up a tunnel to act as a VPN. You could set up similar to a VPN. You could set up a tunnel so that you can access something from the other server. So right here you might be able to see, it's kind of small, but I set up a tunnel running on port 25565 and was able to connect to a Minecraft server that was actually remote, so that's kind of cool. Or over here, able to hit the internal interface for my firewall, so could also be used for some sketchy stuff. Generally used to access things remotely, like if one service needs to access something, you can't hit it directly, you could create a tunnel that allows you to hit it. Or circumvent firewall rules, so getting things out without having to punch a hole in your firewall. So the SSHD configuration file is in /etc/ssh, and it's SSHD_config right there. It's kind of big, but most of it's just comments, and this isn't like that big as configurations files go, like fail to ban is a few thousand lines. This is only a few hundred. Most of it's comments, and commented values are, for the most part, defaults. There are a few of them that aren't, which is kind of weird, but yeah. In general, the default config is secure, or pretty secure. There are a few things that you should probably change, but mostly secure. Competitions probably won't have the default configs, so you might want to look out for that. They normally like to enable root access and some other stuff. So some of the basic config options. If we open this up, you can see as probably, like it's fine. So you can change what port it listens on if you wanted to listen on a port other than port 22. Some people say that that's good for security, but I mean, to a point, you can still see the server security by obscurity, not always the best. Address family, so you can make it listen on IPv4 or IPv6 and force it to listen on one or the other. That, not as useful really, but I mean, can be useful. Host keys is just what the identity for the SSH server. Let's see, what else here? Log level right down here. So that's how verbose the logs are going to be. You can make that up to like debug, and I think debug 3 or debug 4 is the highest level, which will tell you like every single thing that's happening. Or you could just turn off logging. Probably not a good idea. Info or verbose are pretty good for just knowing when people log in. Let's see, what else? Oh yeah, protocols. So there's a bunch of different protocols, but there's like protocol 1, protocol 1.9, and protocol 2, something like that. Protocol 2 is what you're going to want to be on. Protocol 1 does have a few security problems with it. It uses a weak method of encryption for stuff. So that's a good thing to add. So let's add that. Right there. Config. This right here include sshd_config.d/starletconf. So that's going to include everything from sshd. So that's going to include everything in this directory. It's currently empty, but say a red team got on there, they could put something in there quietly, and you might not notice that your SSH config's gotten significantly weaker. So in a competition environment, I'd definitely comment that out or delete that altogether. Let's see, what else in here? Password authentication. That is somewhere down here. There it is, password authentication, yes. So that's just allowing passwords as opposed to pub keys, which we'll get into in a few slides. If you disable that, then it might lock you out accidentally unless you have public keys configured. And then root login is another pretty common one that's changed. Where did that go? There we go, permit root login, prohibit password. So again, that's getting into a little bit into pub keys, which we'll get into. But you should basically always set that to no, unless you have a specific reason to allow root login, which is not that you like being root. So why not root? Well, root user is root. They can do whatever they want. There's pretty much no checks on them. There we go. So they have all the power. They can do pretty much whatever they want to the system. And that's dangerous. You don't want someone to just be able to log in as root to your server. If someone does manage to hack your password or something, you'd want them to be able to log in as an unprivileged user and not be root. And of course, I mean, you'd be logging in as a root user with sudo perms, so they could always sudo-i, but I mean, it's still better because there's one extra layer there. And also, in environments other than like a competition environment, it's good for access logs. So instead of just giving like every employee the root password, you'd want to like give them sudo permissions and then make them their own account so that you can see who logged in and when they logged in, as opposed to just being like, oh yeah, the root account logged in sometime. Also, security by obscurity, not a good thing. However, if something like changing the port, they can just do one scan of your system and know whether or not the port's open, and then they can know what port your SSH is listening on. For usernames, they don't necessarily know that the username's valid unless there's a bug in your SSH version, so keep stuff updated. But unless there's a problem with your version, they can't necessarily know if your username is a valid one. So if they're just like trying some random invalid username over and over again, that's not very productive for someone trying to brute force you. So changing your username from root means that it could be literally anything else. And even if it's something like another common username, user or something like that, that's just one extra level of one extra thing that they have to brute force. So right here, this is the list. Since September 21st, the top 10 most common usernames from people trying to brute force a server I have. Yes, it does have failed to ban, so these are from a few hundred different IP addresses. Actually, probably like 1,000 different IP addresses. And you can see that almost all of the attempts were root by a pretty large margin. and admin was second. So don't have your username that you log in as be root or admin, or pretty much anything else in that list. Maybe just your name or something, a little bit more secure. Also, we'll get into it in a sec, but well, I'll talk about that after keys. So what's PubKey authentication? I've talked about this a little bit. So PubKeys is basically like a really long password, except you don't need to type it. It's in a file. So you can make yourself a PubKey with SSH keygen. It'll ask you a few questions and then generate a file. And if we go right here in your home directory /.ssh, that's going to put two files in here, id_rsa and id_rsa.pub, unless you choose a different name. So that id_rsa has your actual key in it. And basically what PubKey authentication does is instead of using your password to log in, it just sends this whole file effectively. So instead of having your password, you might have a really good password. Maybe you have like a 64-character password, kind of hard to remember, kind of hard to type. Instead, PubKey authentication just sends password this long, really long, much more secure, much harder to guess, pretty much unreasonable to brute force that. So it's more secure generally. You're not going to be able to just guess that. Some random person on the internet isn't going to be like, oh, aha, I guessed your PubKey. And it's authenticated with the server using this other file, id_rsa.pub or whatever it is, .pub. So this is the signature for it. I'm not going to get into how RSA AES encryption works because I don't know a lot about that. But basically, it uses this value as your public key. And this is the private key. So when someone sends you something, they encrypt it with this value. And then you can decrypt it with this value, or maybe it's the other way around. I don't know. So you encrypt it with one of the values, they encrypt it with the other one, or they decrypt it with the other one, and yay, security. Yeah, so pub keys means that you wouldn't have to enter a password when you log in, which is kind of nice, and significantly more secure, but there is a limit to that. So the big difference is that your password is something that you probably remembered or have on a sticky note on your desktop. Not a good idea. But the pub key is going to be on your computer. So that's really secure until someone like steals your laptop. And this goes back a little bit to that whole root thing. So if someone steals your laptop and it has your password on a sticky note on it, that's not good. They can just like SSH into your server, they have your password, boom. Someone steals your laptop and you use a private key, then yeah, they have your private key, they immediately get in on your unprivileged account, but they aren't root because they still need your password to be able to sudo unless you have stuff set up bad, but don't do it that way. So a little bit extra layer of security there as well, except not really because I mean they already have remote access with a somewhat privileged account, so like that's bad. So let's do some demonstrations of this. Live demos. Let's hope this doesn't break. So if I remember correctly, this one is, yeah, so the server box is going to be at 10.0.0.10, and your clients are going to be at 10.0.0.11 and 10.0.0.12. I added two clients. I don't really think we'll use the second one, but yeah. So let's see. That's going to be hard to see. Is there a way to make the text bigger in this? I don't know. Is that okay to see? I don't. It's on the checklist. Yeah, that's probably.
Just give up.
Okay, well. Aha. Oh, that looks so bad. It's like, well, whatever. You can see that, hopefully. So if we wanted to SSH into this server, then it's SSH, the username that you're SSHing from, or the username that you're SSHing into. So that would be like DSU is the account I want to use. And then the IP address, 10. Then, oh, look at that, it works. So I'll explain that prompt in a minute. So then it prompts you for your password. So password, bang. If anyone's following along, I definitely spelled something wrong. There we go. And yeah, so I got logged in right there. So now I'm logged in to the other server, so you can see my prompt changed to DSU at server instead of DSU at client 1. So now I'm logged into this computer, so I can do commands like listing documents. I could, I don't know, go to their desktop and like make a file there. Then if they were on their computer, they'd be like, whoa, this new file appeared that says hi. I didn't do it. Yeah, fun stuff. So with a pub key, if I do like SSH, keygen, and it's going to generate a new key. Then there's this nice command, SSH copy ID. So that's going to allow you to copy your key. SSH copy ID, and then the username at the host. So that's going to copy your key over. You've got to enter your password. Now your key has been copied over onto this machine. So if we open up a new tab here, some lag there. So right now we're in the DSU's home directory and in their .ssh folder. So we can see there's this new file called authorized keys. And if we look at that, it has this long string there, their public key. And if we look at client 1's, let's see, ID rsa.pub, right there, same key. So it just basically copies this key over, puts it into this file. And now, when we try to log in using that same command, instead of prompting for the password, it just logs you straight in. So pretty nice, pretty convenient, and also generally more secure until someone steals your laptop. Let's see, what else? So there's some more options that allow you to change, like if TCP forwarding is on, gateway ports are on, stuff like that. Allows you to enable or disable tunneling and stuff like that. Thing to keep in mind, if they have access to your system, just because you have tunneling off doesn't mean they can't still do it some way. Once you log into here, I can like log into here and then SSH into, I don't know, some other place, user at devstack.what is this gonna work? Yeah, so I can like SSH into some other server. Didn't like that because I'm not using the right public key, but yeah, let's see. So let's go back to some of these other options. We can show some of those. So if we go back to, oh, wait, no, I had that open over here. So if we edit this SSHD_config file again, you can go down here. So let's experiment with some of these options. We could like change the port. So say we wanted to listen on port 23, something like that. Then whenever you change options, you have to do systemctl restart SSHD, or sometimes it's also SSH. SSH. Depends on the system. A lot of times SSH and SSHD and SSH-server, I think is the other one, are all aliases for each other. So if we restart that, then, there we go. If I try to SSH in again, it's not gonna work. It's like connection refused, nothing there. So you can add a -p at the end of that and port 23, yeah, there we go. So now I'm logged in on port 23 instead of port 22. Kind of useful. That one's generally not used that much. I mean, you can change the port if you want, but security by obscurity, not the best. Let's see, what else do we want to change? So if we changed down here, so PubkeyAuthentication is set to yes right now, which means that we can authenticate with that pub key. If we set this to no, and then restart SSH again, now when we go back over here and we try to SSH in again as DSU, and this time on port 22 because I changed that. Then it will ask me for the password again, even though I have that key set up. Got to use that password. You can also have PubkeyAuthentication enabled, and then disable password authentication if you want. Really depends on the context and what you're trying to do. Let's see, what other fun stuff. So some of these advanced options, I'm not going to go through most of these. Some of the interesting things, though, yeah. Well, let's see. So you can change how often the keep alive is sent. So that could be useful when you're connected. The server will occasionally send a few packets to the client that say like, hey, you still there? And if the client just suddenly disappears, then changing this interval is going to tell the server the client's dead. You can chroot, so that basically instead of having this be a root cd slash, there we go. Instead of having this be a root slash, you could have it be some other folder. But that's good. That gets a little bit complicated and isn't that much more secure unless you implement it really, really well. And most likely you're probably going to mess something up. So it doesn't add a lot more security, but does add a lot of complexity. Let's see, most of these, this one can be kind of fun to mess with red team. It adds whatever text you want at the end of the version, but generally not that useful. So some more stuff. This is more the permissions type things. So you can allow users or groups, or also deny users and groups from logging in. So if we add user 2 and password bang. If we add another user, default settings, and edit that config file again. Oh, okay. Then we can allow users that user 1, and if we reload SSH again, go here. I'm already logged in. So when you reload SSH, it doesn't kill connections. So that's something good to keep in mind. If you wanted to make sure that red team's not in there, it might be good to go through connections and kill those. So if we try to SSH in again as DSU, it says permission denied. Can't log in as DSU. It doesn't tell you that the username's invalid or anything. It just says you can't log in. Same as if you'd entered your password wrong. But if we SSH as user 1, oh, I did something wrong. I forgot to enable password authentication again, I think. Yep, there we go. Ha, I turned off password authentication. There we go. So, so if we try to SSH in as DSU, it's just not going to work. It says permission denied, even though we got the right password on that. But if we try as user 1, maybe. Did I spell that wrong? This is going to be awkward. Spell my passwords wrong. Okay, I can't spell. Oh, I did user 2. Ha, okay. Let's, instead of allowed users, user 1, let's allow users, user 2. And then try to sign in as user 2. There we go. Now I signed in successfully there as user 2. But if we try to sign in as DSU, it doesn't accept that pub key anymore, and the password's just not going to work anymore. So yeah, that's pretty useful for allowing or denying users. In a CC/DC environment, you might want to only allow the users that should have access to that system, maybe not allow some other users. Or you could only allow certain groups. Like in a corporate environment, you might want to only allow your, I don't know, remote administrator group to be able to log in via SSH, and Your normal administrators couldn't. They'd have to be physically there, though that would be kind of weird. Let's see, what else? So you might have noticed when I SSH in, I'm gonna revert those allowed users so that we get to use PubKey again. There we go. So when I log in, there's a bunch of text that comes up. It says, welcome to Ubuntu 20.04. Here's some documentation and support, blah, blah, blah. No updates to install. And right here it says last login was Tuesday, September 29th at 17:53. So that was, what, a few minutes ago from me logging in as user 1. So if you wanted some of that information to not show up, then you can like disable the MOTD. So that's going to disable that help text. So we go down here, I think it is. And we'll just add it. So we add like print MOTD no, assuming I spelled that correctly. Nope, I definitely messed that up. Oh no, I already have that enabled down here. Okay. Oh right, Ubuntu is different and has another MOTD. Okay, that's not the best example. Let's try a different example because Ubuntu is a little bit different. Print last log. So print last log to no. So now when I log in, it doesn't show that last login by whoever. In order to disable the MOTD, you have to disable it in Ubuntu. So I think if we just rm update MOTD, probably a bad idea, but yeah, there we go. No MOTD. Not recommended way of doing that, but it works. SSH banners are kind of cool. That will show up before you enter your password. So if we do like banner and then like banner, and then we go edit, let's see, banner, say like, hi, welcome to my server. Then when we try to SSH in again, all right, didn't restart SSH. Says, hi, welcome to my server, right before the prompt. And if we try to SSH in as user 2, then it will say that right before your password prompt. And then you log in. So like hostbin has dev.hostbin, which is Andrew Kramer's server, has a cool MOTD. So if we log in here with, you can see prints like, boom, dev.hostbin.org, cool, big MOTD. Does have last login enabled, so that's kind of interesting. What else? Oh yeah, match. Match is another fun one. So this goes along with some of those user permissions. That's not a good file. Okay. So say we wanted like some different settings for different users. So let's say we wanted to make, I don't know, maybe user 1 can only, or maybe the DSU user, match user DSU. We wanted to say like they can only do password authentication. I probably spelled that wrong. And we wanted to like, what else? Maybe we'll not allow PubkeyAuthentication. I'm just going to copy it because I'm going to spell stuff wrong. And we wanted to like disallow PubkeyAuthentication. Then even though it's enabled globally right here, nope, that's password. Even though it's enabled globally right there, then we just disable it right there for the user DSU. And, I probably spelled this wrong. What did I spell wrong? Nope. Let's see what this spell wrong.
You do SSHD-T.
Oh. Right. That's what I did wrong. So match should actually be at the bottom of the file. There we go. Now, is it going to be happy with me? Yeah, there we go. So now, if we SSH in as DSU, it no longer accepts that public key. So we got to do password 1 bang to get in there. If we SSH in as user 2, it's also going to ask for our password because we haven't copied over that key. If we SSH copy ID to user 2 at 10.0.0.10 and enter their password, and then we try to SSH into them again, then it accepted right there, logs straight in, but DSU still can't use that public key even though it's already on there. So that can be kind of handy if you wanted to have like some people that have to use passwords, some people that have to use keys or disable keys for a certain user. You can also like give people different banners, so if one user is trying to log in, they get different banner. You can also use force command, which is kind of fun. Let's see, so down here, if we, instead of that, we do, you don't have to indent it. I like to indent it because it looks a little bit nicer. Force command, echo hi. And let's see, so we SSH in DSU, and you can see after that hi, welcome to my server, it says hi again. But if we try to SSH in as user 2, then it doesn't say hi. So that could be kind of cool. You could like force them to only be able to do one thing. Might be useful, might not be. People sometimes use that for jailing someone as opposed to like just changing their shell. But you could change how many sessions a user is allowed to have. Okay, so let's talk about good configuration. So in pretty much any environment, and let's set this up at the same time. There we go. So in pretty much any environment, you're going to want to have protocol 2. You're going to want to disable root login. So instead of just being like deny users root, it's just permit root login now. Ignore R hosts. We didn't talk about that, but it's host authentication. So it's basically like a public key, private key authentication, except for the computer. That is really only good in very select circumstances, and you're probably not going to be doing that. And if you are, then it will probably be already set up, or you'll know a lot more about it by then. So ignore R hosts. Yes. Let's see, what else? Permit empty passwords. You probably don't want people logging in with empty passwords or being able to set their password to an empty password. So like that's not a good thing to have. Allowed users. Generally good to set who's allowed to log in via SSH. You don't want everyone to be able to. So say like someone got on and set the password for some account, like DNS mask. You probably don't want them to be able to log on via SSH if they happen to have a password. If red team gets on and changes the password for some user, gives them a shell, probably don't want them to be able to log in via SSH. Allowed groups, also a good thing to do. So in a real corporate environment, probably going to want to have PubkeyAuthentication is yes. You're probably going to have some corporate banner. Maybe you'd even have something like match address. So you can do that to only allow logins from one host. I probably spelled that wrong. Match address. So let's say that from 10.0.0.11, we're going to, I know, give them the banner 1, and then from 10.0.0.12, we're going to give them banner 2. So if we want banner 1, so like you are from 11 to I know. And then restart this. Hope I spelled everything right. Yeah, it looks like I did. So if we try to SSH in from here, it says like you are from 10.0.0.11. But if we go here, go into client 2, launch web console. Nope, SSH. We try to SSH into DSU at 10.0.0.10. And you can see it says, hi Bob. Yeah, super cool. Yeah, so what's this? This is a fingerprint for the server. So the server generates their own private key file, and there's a fingerprint for that, just like a hash of it. And the server tells that to you and is like, hey, this is my fingerprint. So then the client can be like, yep, that fingerprint matches the one that we already have for that server, everything's good. Or if maybe you were getting man in the middle, someone controlled or took over the box and changed the key or something crazy happened, then you'd be like, hey, not gonna work, new key, it complains. It was doing that for me the other night because I did something and then I just deleted all of my known keys. Yeah, that was janky. Let's see what else. So yeah, so you might match some address, maybe like your internal network, people are allowed to log in from, like your external one, only certain people are allowed to log in from. In a competition style environment, you're definitely going to want to have PubKey authentication off, or PubKey authentication on and password authentication off. Because in a competition style environment, red team gets in with file system access, maybe even as just a low permission user, like they get some backdoor on a website that allows them access as www.data, which is the website user. They can just put a private key on to that user's home directory under .ssh/authorized keys. Then they can SSH in as that user, get a full shell. I mean, it's mostly going to slow them down, but also pretty good thing. And then also if they have a script on your server that's just constantly like putting their key into the public allowed keys folder, and like, yeah, you can give red team a banner. Be like, hi red team, not very nice to hack my server. I did that once. I think red team said it was dumb. It was funny. Let's see what else. Yeah, that's all I have for that. Are there any questions other than one person complaining about stuff? Any questions in Discord? We're good?
Cool, that helps.